Okay, the point of this presentation really is firstly to encourage people that maybe have gotten new to the hobby or really just focused on VHF, UHF, to say there is a whole new area to this hobby that might seem scary, but I'm going to show how it doesn't have to be scary, and it's relatively simple and relatively cheap to get involved with. But also for those people that maybe have a HF station at home, about the possibility of going portable operations. So we tend to think of, or certainly before I got involved in it, I tended to think of HF as being something that was very big and complex. So how can we make it actually easier than you think? So you tend to think HF, oh, that's big, very expensive radios. And really to get power, you need to have a really big, expensive amplifier. And now that starts to become an issue around safety, etc., that you've got to deal with. And if you're going to put big power out there, you really need a big tower. You need to have big antennas loaded on it, and probably expensive rotators to actually make the whole thing work. And yes, whilst you can actually look at those kind of stations, and they will get you much more than just going portable, the point is that you don't have to go to that extreme, just at least to get started on HF. So what I've been doing is working with Paul, VA3FUZ, and also with Robert, VA3BXG, and building parts from the Barry Amateur Radio Club. So they have a group called the Wireless Amateur Experimenters Group, or WAX, and they have this thing called a WAX tenor, and it's a 3D printed coil, and then uses a military whip, which has often been available in hamfests. That's probably about 16 foot long or so, and closes down to a very compact size. And the original design of this is to build out a dipole using 2 coils, 2 military whips, etc. So I'm just going to talk about what we did from a portable operations point of view and some of the other options that are around. So one of the options, and I'm calling this my biscuit tin antenna mount, but there's an antenna called a Comet HFJ 350M, and there is also the toy box version. What the toy box version gives you is access to 160 meters and 80 meters as well. But the actual antenna is a small UHF section with a vertical extending element on the top. And literally you set up the base on top of a UHF mount. In this case, I've actually used a car mobile mount that I had available and mounted it onto the biscuit tin. That bottom section, you can then put various plugs in to say, well, I want to do 20 meters or 15 or 10 meters. And you then just need a counterpoise to go with it. So you actually just get a clip and the length of wire and clip it onto the base of the antenna, and you're basically up and running. They actually give you the measurements for how tall that antenna should be, the telescoping antenna. So you can actually be on the air very, very quickly. The biscuit tin actually also becomes the place where I can put the cable in from the mobile mount and all of the tools and things that I need to go with it. So it's a very compact way of actually taking an antenna out. You just sit it down on the ground, lay your counterpoise out, extend the element to the right length, and you're up and running. So this is a very good antenna for people starting out. It's very cheap. I think it's around about $150 or so for the toy box version. There is a simpler one that doesn't do the 80 and the 160 meters, which is a bit cheaper as well. But for the amount of cost difference, it was worth going for the full one. And I believe, John, VE3IPS, you've tried this antenna out as well. I wonder if you can comment on any successes you've had with that one.
Yeah, the antenna works pretty good. It's a compromised antenna, right? So it's only 8 feet long. So
yeah,
you need to understand that. But you do need to read the instructions, because initially what I did, I don't read instructions. So I just pull the whip out and just figure I use the tapping points, but it's the tapping point and the length of the whip that's critical. So you want to make sure that you follow the instructions and you do need a radio for it in order to get the SWR down. But it does work well. You will make contacts. The nice thing about this one is it will take 100 watts, where some of the other clone versions are rated at 25 watts. So for most people that are now going to a park with like a 7300 or a 991 or an FT891, and or want to use 100 watts when the band conditions are good, this antenna will take it. I've made contacts into Europe on it and checked into the eCars net on the East Coast on a Saturday afternoon with 50 watts, no problem.
Perfect. Thank you. So yeah, it's a really cheap antenna. It is definitely compromise, but I'm going to show you some of the stats I've done with Whisper. I'm using this in antenna indoors, and how successful it's been as well. But what I did was I also moved away from the biscuit tin base, and I actually built in a couple of connectors inside a military box. This is one of the metal military boxes. And again, this has now become where I actually place all the cables and things when it's put away. And it just gives it a bit more weight, sturdiness when it actually goes out and about. But also inside that, with the connector, I've also used this to make a small ballon, just to stop stray RF coming back down the cable as well. On there, you can see in the middle picture just the connector that I've got, and I made up two segments, one for 20 meters, and then one for 40 meters, and then used Anderson power pole connectors again to make an extension for an 80 meter
counterpoint.
Counterpoise. So very quick to roll out, very easy to use. Okay, go the right way with the pictures. So this is what I've been able to do with just a 20 meters indoor, and I use this thing called the Nano VNA to actually just check the SWR before I plug it into my actual radio. So I've been using an FT991 as the radio for this for portable use, and you can see that from the bottom line is the 1-to-1. The second line up is the 2-to-1, third line 3-to-1, and so on. You can see that actually the SWR is really good across the whole of the band. But that's just a case of playing with that counterpoise and playing with the length of the antenna, as John said. Once you get it right, measure the distances, and then you should be able to get that without using the Nano VNA. You should be able to repeat that when you go out and about. But I would say the Nano VNA is a critical part of this. So just for reference, this is what that Nano VNA looks like. Mine's a version called H4. There's variations on it. There are various pieces and components to it. The four down the left-hand side, one of them is an open, one is a closed circuit, and one is a 50 ohm. And you basically calibrate this little measurement tool. It can do a whole ton of extra things that I haven't gone into, but I'm using it primarily for SWR just to check the antennas right again before I plug in a radio. And I've done a 3.5 to 30 megahertz range when I've calibrated it, so I can see the whole spectrum of HF. Then I did one specifically around 40 meters and specifically around 20 meters, just so I can really finely tune the antenna when I actually get there. Obviously, you could go for the more expensive items. Rig Expert turned out some fantastic analyzers for antennas. Again, this would be really good in your kit bag. They tend to be more expensive, but they're also drop proof and waterproof and things like that. So a better quality thing, but then that's reflected in the price as well. But a very good tool to have in your kit bag if you're playing with building antennas and doing stuff like that. So then back to that coil antenna that we actually have been playing with and building. This is what that coil kind of looks like. It's got 3/8-24 connections on both ends, which is typical of a lot of things like the military antennas and the ham sticks, those kind of things. They all tend to use that same kind of connector. This one, in this case, it uses these military whips. They're called an AT271 PRC. As I say, often pick them up at hamfests. And the wax tenor, the actual design for everything and the notes for it is actually on the Barry website. But also the actual plans for doing the printing, the 3D printing, is out there on a thing called Thingiverse, which is where a lot of 3D printing stuff is found. So there is a coil former where you actually wind the 16 gauge wire around. There are two ends and there is a hex core that goes inside it. So I don't know if you can still see my video connection. That's kind of one of the antennas that you'll see, but then it's made up of smaller components. Like this is one of the coil formers, and then there is a section of hex that goes inside that actually makes the physical electrical connections, etc., to the coil, and then a couple of ends that go on just to kind of seal the whole thing up. Very quick and easy to make once you actually get the thing printed. And then what we also did, Paul and I, Paul's suggestion was that usually you use just like an alligator clip to actually find the right place on the coil to tune into. But these items, the blue, the red, and the black items are actually from Buddy Pole themselves, and actually make a very good connection that you can then repeat. So I know that, for instance, the red and the blue might be 20 meters and 40 meters when I do a horizontal dipole. The black one could be for when I'm doing 40 meters vertical or something. And you can see that this hex core has the end of the coil going through it. The threaded rod connects down onto it and actually makes an electrical circuit, which then goes out to either the top or the bottom of the coil. But go back. So again, just another view on putting this together. You can partly see the hex core inside there with the threaded rod in it, and then you use these coupling nuts to actually make something that you can plug in the actual antenna to, and the wander lead at the other end. And you can just see partially a central core that would actually make the center of the dipole, where you would connect in a cable. And I've then had problems with actually using this, and I'll show you why as we go through this. So building the coils itself wasn't too bad. Trying to get this wire through that hole at one end is not too bad. Trying to do it at the other end once it's connected is more problematical, but it's possible to do it, obviously, and get it up and running. This now becomes, though, however, a weak point. And this is what I found when I actually started assembling this and laying it out as a dipole, or even just dismantling it as a vertical. That area where the wire goes through that hex core and connects to the threaded rod has become a weak point. So we changed and we created some more printouts of this using a stronger method of doing the printing, called 100% infill. And even that at the weekend broke for me. So I'm busily trying to redesign what that inner core looks like. But the concept actually works. We can get really good SWR on it, to the point where, this is kind of SWR on 40 meters and getting really good around the FT8 and whisper kind of frequencies. But pretty good across the band. You can get less than 3 to 1 across the band, which means most HF tuners that are built into a radio will actually work and get you going. So Paul in particular has had a great lot of success with this. So you can see the left-hand vehicle here has a painter's pole. It's got the central component that actually holds the two dipoles together, with the military whips actually stretched out. On my vehicle, I happen to be using just two 40-meter ham sticks to try and test out SWR as well. But Paul's first test out on this got him through to Spain and places like the RSGB headquarters in the UK, as well as various US states. So I think Paul was very happy with what he'd actually managed to build out there. And get going. Very successful first run at this. And then this is actually at the park that was talked about earlier on at Maple. Again, this is the painter pole, and you can see a bit clearer here how the actual antennas are set up with the two coil formers in the middle and then the military antenna sticking out left and right. And Paul here was running a POTA station and getting many US states that were contacted. First times through, I think Paul was getting like a 5.3, but over the last 2 or 3 times we've been out, he's been getting 5.9 reports from across the US, and people are really asking, what is it you're actually running there, because you've got amazing signals. So a really nice, cheap way to build a HF antenna system and get up and operational on HF without building out towers and rotators, etc. So we have had great success. This again was the 40 meter. Because one side of my horizontal dipole had broken, I just used one coil and turned it into a vertical, and got really good results on the SWR to be able to use that. So 1.18 at 7 megahertz and almost down to 1-to-1 around the FT8 frequencies. So I talked about doing using the Comet antenna, this very small antenna. I actually set it up indoors in an upstairs room and set it going with Whisper. So the WSPR program was running, and you can see on the right hand side I've actually got through to Australia. In fact, this is sorry, FT8 that was running, but getting through to Australia on 5 watts on 40 meters on Whisper, and probably a bit more to actually do the FT8. But the point is the connection actually went through with an internal indoor antenna with one of these relatively cheap antennas. By putting the antenna coil, the one that we actually built outdoors, I did similar kind of testing around 20 meters, and you can see it's got through to Hawaii, Canary Islands, and Brazil. So very successful in terms of actually getting up there and using it once it is actually working. The issue is really just that central core. It's very fragile, and we need to work on how to improve that. Again, indoor on Whisper, getting really strong signals into Europe, down to Argentina and through to Brazil, out to New Zealand and Australia, again on this indoor antenna. This is Paul. He's got his antenna now set up on a lighting stand, which actually gives it a fair amount of stability because the legs are quite wide, and running this vertical. One of the things that you'll also see in this image is the 2 yellow sticks, and that actually enables us to keep the counterpoise off the ground. They're from Princess Auto. They're like $5 a piece, and they've got a metal end, so it goes into the ground, but they're designed for electrical fences. So they are, there's no chance that electrical stuff is going to go through them. They are really good at actually holding counterpoise wire off the ground, and really easy to set up and use. And again, every time we've done this, the internal tuner on these radios has been able to actually keep control of SWR. Again, this was one of the latest POTA activations that Paul did. And really, this is about how quick it is to actually get set up and tear it down. Paul actually got this system set up in under 10 minutes, got it all tuned up, made contacts, 13 contacts to activate the POTA site, and then shut down and packed away within 10 minutes. And that was because we started to hear a storm coming through. We checked, and yes, there was a big storm coming in, which I think is the one that hit us last weekend. And so we managed to clear out very quickly. So it's lots of fun, lots of chance to actually make contacts around the world and around the US, and do portable operations. And Paul tends to focus more on phone. I've been playing around with FT8 and things like that around these antennas, but lots of different ways that you can actually get onto HF without spending too much money. And do things very quick, and even building the antennas yourself and learning about antennas as you're actually doing it. I've certainly learned a lot about SWR and coils and things like that in doing this. So key messages is And I've said this to lots of people that have been playing with HF after I did it. And I guess once you know, you've played with it yourself. But get some wire in the air. Try something out, and don't overthink it. I've seen people that have got their 100% on their advanced, and they're still a year, 2 years later, still trying to work out what kind of antenna to put up. And the idea is just get some wire in the air. You'll start to learn about the antennas. Don't overthink it, and also keep it simple. Particularly if you're going to go and do this like the parks on the air, you need to keep things as simple as possible, just so it's quick to set up and quick to tear down and get you operating. Again, if you're going to go out in the parks and things like that, don't forget some of these goat kit items like suntan lotion or a sun umbrella, or canopy, to keep the heat off the radio and off yourself, and actually give you the chance to actually be able to see the screens. Radio screens and that VNA are not really ideal for park operations. The sunlight, it will reflect off anything that is out there. And the black radio cases that we tend to have on these radios, they eat the heat. So it's also about protecting your radio as well. And then if you're going to do things in the evenings, remember bug spray. So overall, though, have fun. And certainly Paul and I have had lots of fun trying to do this, learning about the antennas, learning about what works and what doesn't work. And it's been a great opportunity to actually get out of the house and actually during the summer and actually enjoy radio on the go. So HF does not have to be expensive and complex. Start with one of these, the simple build-it-yourself antennas like the wax tenor from Barry, or John V3 IPS has actually got plans on his blog site for an 80-meter, 40-meter NVIS antenna, which is basically made out of 100 foot of speaker cable that you can buy very cheaply from places like Sayal, and very easy to set up. If you want to buy a commercial antenna, that Comet HFJ 350M, I would strongly recommend it. It's a very good antenna. It is compromised, as John said, as many of these things are, but it will actually get you up and running and out there, and then able to start enjoying HF in all its different variations. And as for that, the VNA, the analyzer, borrow one if you need to, or buy them on Amazon. They are relatively cheap compared to the Rig Expert. But if you can go for the Rig Expert, something like that is always good to have in your kit bag of things. And then lastly, just think about innovating. So one of the things that I actually also got printed recently was, I assume you can see this, is another coil former, but this one actually takes a UHF connector directly on the bottom. And the idea is to actually use this with just a long length of wire going vertical and a counterpoise. So this is what I've actually got on the image on the screen. I call this my stairwell antenna. So literally, my basement doesn't have a door at the first floor. It has a door at the basement. So I've got a very long stairwell I can use. And I actually put the 16.5 foot of antenna wire going up and down there, and around the counterpoise in the basement. And actually got really good SWR results on both 20 and 40 for this. So you can see there, the right-hand side is the 40-meter band, below is the 20-meter band. So be innovative as to where you're going to locate this antenna. Admittedly, inside the house is not going to be the best. If you can get these antennas outside and hung properly up, you're obviously going to get better results. But there's no reason why any of this kind of stuff shouldn't stop you, even if you're in a condo or a small apartment or location with not very much space outdoors. This is a really good way to go and get you up and running. Okay, that was it. That was my very 30 minutes quick run through of getting operational on HF for people maybe that aren't there, or if you're HF at home, getting out and doing things portable.